Okay, so we're moving on from abalone, from rock lobster to abalone. But before I start, can I just get a feel from the room? Who's eaten abalone in this room? So not very many. Did you like it? Yeah?
Wasn't bad.
Sort of. Okay. The difference between this room and a room like this in China would be, if I asked that question, everybody would have had their hand up. Right? And so it speaks to Hollis's point that when we're in China, we need to be looking at the China market through the lens of the Chinese. And that sounds, oh yeah, that's logical, but it's a lot harder to do in practice as we're all finding out. So in terms of this session, so Hollis has set the scene nicely about sort of the big picture and what's going on in China, and then we've had Matt who's talked to us about all the research they've done, and they're just about to sort of launch into a lot of market activation activities. The Australian Wild Abalone program started about for those who don't know what they look like, they're not a particularly attractive thing, right, from my perspective. If I had a lovely piglet up there, I mean, people get sort of emotionally attached to pigs and animals, but abalone is kind of a hard thing to get attached to, really, as an animal. So from a marketing perspective, we really got to think about how we're going to market this product. So our China journey has been pretty much like that, and we knew where we wanted to be, and we just did a lot of stuff, and some of it was good, some of it was bad, and some of it we're still trying to figure out whether it's been bad or good. So our challenge, in the year 2000, Australia was actually the world's largest single producer of abalone. We provided over 50% of global supply. And in 10 years, we became we now only supply 4% of the global supply. So in that time, online came a bunch of people farming abalone, mainly in China. So the point where about 90,000 tonnes of abalone is farmed in China, we produce about 4,000 tonnes of wild abalone in Australia. So we're really tiny. And what happened then was with all that extra competition, basically our price just went over a cliff fairly quickly. So if you're running an abalone business within 10 years, you were getting half of what you were getting, and the costs were pretty much still the same. So this happened in a situation where we had a fixed supply. We can't, as in lobster, for our wild products, we can't go in and just grow more or make more. We have 4,000 tonnes. We will never have more than 4,000 tonnes. It will always be that. If anything, it's probably going to go down. But at the same time, we've got this potential increasing demand because, as Hollis has said, the Chinese consumer the middle class is growing, and this abalone was always been an aspirational food. So the demand for abalone was increasing, but the supply basically outstripped demand. And there was this increased competition. We also had a fragmented industry. The industry wasn't working together. All the individual companies were selling into China, They've been there for about 20 or 30 years, and they saw their next door neighbour as their competition. And then each state saw the other state as being a different, as being competition, and the processors saw the divers and the quota owners as being competition. So nobody was really working together. So we had a very disconnected industry. And there was a huge information gap. So at the time that these farmed abalones were coming on stream, there was no way for people to tell what was an Australian abalone versus a farmed abalone. Now, if I was talking to a group of abalone guys, they'd say, well, of course it is. It's easy to tell the difference. But unfortunately, unless you tell people how to tell the difference, they're not going to know how to tell the difference. And with all the counterfeiting that goes on in China anyway, if you did have a way of telling people how to tell Australian from another, you probably find yourself being copied anyway. So there was a big information gap for consumers about how to tell your product away from any others. There were significant myths and legends too about Australian wild abalone. So what we had was, we had a perfect storm. Okay, we had increased competition, we had no control over our supply chain, we were acting as traders, we were literally putting the product into the belly of a plane and sending it up to China and just taking the check. And when the checks started to go down, it was, what are we going to do? So they came to the Australian Seafood CRC, which is where I was, and we said, okay, well, let's do some market research. Let's find if there's any opportunity to do something about this. So we did a bunch of research, which I'm not going to go into, but we found that we did have some opportunities. So abalone in China is a very traditional food. It is a food that was, revered by the emperors. It's a sort of imperial cuisine, which is the highest level cuisine. And it's one of the 4 treasures, the others being bird's nest, shark fin, and sea cucumber. Has anyone here eaten sea cucumber? Do you like that? Not really. No, exactly. But for a Chinese person, it's nice, right? Yeah. Yeah. So abalone is a great product from that perspective. It's got a really deep-rooted cultural footprint in China. But it's only eaten on special occasions. So it's only eaten at Chinese New Year, grandmother's 70th birthday, all these sort of very traditional times. And when we first started this project, it was in fairly limited cuisines. We produce abalone like this and we eat it like this. It's very, very limited. So in modern China, where we've got young, upwardly mobile people with lots more money than they used to have, our challenge was, how do we modernise abalone? Because all of our consumers were literally getting old and dying, and the younger consumers have far more choice. Why would they pay $50 for an Australian wild abalone when they can buy an abalone that was from China probably for $1? You know, so that was the difference that we were talking about. So we decided we're going to make it trendy. So this took about 2 years of research to come up with this. This is our Australian wild abalone trademark. It's registered here in China and every other place that we can come up with. There's a lot of things about this. The colour. The colour is blue because it's fresh, it's blue, I think it's the Great Barrier Reef, it's gorgeous. You know, that's something that it means Australia to them. It's got the diver in the middle because when we did our research, what was the big thing that made Australian wild abalone different from farmed abalone is the diver. The diver who goes down every day, risking his life, and they're all he's, risking his life against sharks and all sorts of dangers. So we decided that the diver had resonance for the consumer. And we used Australian and the Chinese language. And the big thing around that too was that it's In China, there's a thing called a chop. So it's a round seal, like on official documents. So this is an official seal. It's like a chop from in a Chinese way. So it's a trust mark. And so through all this research, we came up with our story. So it's hand harvested by brave divers who go out every day into the pristine clear waters, and we can produce a product that is safe, tasty and nutritious. That was our competitive advantage. And we went further. We said not only do we do that, but we could provide it in different formats so that it can be versatile in terms of how you cook with it. So remember I said it was previously in a very sort of limited cuisine range, so we started to show people how you can make it modern and trendy. And then we had to speak to the confidence piece. We had to talk about how could consumers be confident that when they bought something that said it was Australian wild abalone, it actually was. So we did a number of things. And one of the things we did was we investigated and started to use a nanotag protection system. So that's essentially microdots, and it's used by luxury car manufacturers to stop people from counterfeiting the car parts and things. But we decided, well, let's try and use it on food. So we did a bit of research around that, and so we started introducing nanotags onto packaging of our abalone. The other thing, remember I said we had a fragmented industry. We needed to work together. If we didn't work together, we were not going to be able to find that position that we needed to be in, and we all needed to be in agreement about what that position is. So it's not about price fixing. There's no price fixing here. We never talk about price, but it's about the positioning. Where is Australia's abalone versus the competitors? So these are 14 companies, all the processors and exporters. It's about 80% it covers 80% of what we export to China. And not only is it just the processors, but we also have the divers and the quota owners also part of this, so they also are able to use the trademark. We set ourselves some marketing objectives, as you always do, which is basically to increase the desirability of abalone, Australian wild abalone, and to give it a distinct place separate to all the other abalones that they can get. And we identified a bunch of things we needed to do. And essentially, I'll just quickly run through. So we had to do some trade and market access work, which you guys are doing. We had to do some B2B work. We're just starting to do some B2consumer work, which is that social media piece that Matt mentioned. But mainly, the first part is getting that supply chain right, getting that communication with your supply chain right. So we've got a huge library now of videos and other resources, English, Chinese, simplified and traditional, Japanese, because we also have a market in Japan, of videos and materials that anybody in the supply chain can get and use, freely available to everybody. We've run supply chain briefings and workshops right around the country, because I think somebody asked here about, about the supply chain. So yes, if you go into China and you don't work with your supply chain, they're going to think you're trying to cut them out of something, and they will fight back. And yeah, I don't know, you might end up with at the bottom of the Huangpu River or something, but so we've worked really hard to bring our supply chain with us. So these are importers, chefs, media, anybody who is interested. And we created partnerships with them. So they're not just, they're real partnerships too. They're partnerships in every sense of the word. The guy on just here, he's the Vice President of the China Cuisine Association. We were introduced to him 2010, and it's taken us 5 years. to really build the relationship with them. It's really at a great point now. The China Cuisine Association, their remit by the Chinese government is to preserve traditional culinary skills of China. The Chinese see culinary skills as one of 8 key arts to be preserved into the future. So that's a great partner for us, because remember, we're an imperial food, it's a traditional cooking, so we have a great partnership. Up there we've got our supply chain, our importers, trying to understand the nanotag situation, and down in the bottom corner there is a personality chef from Shanghai. And we made them all foundation partners, so they too are part of the Australian Wild Abalone program. They can put the Australian Wild Abalone logo on their shops or on their tanks if they want to. We built a website. Now here was our first mistake. We built a website here in Australia, and we spent a lot of money to get it translated into traditional simplified Chinese and Japanese, and we thought, job's done. It took us about a year, and we launched it, and what we found was that the Chinese, because of the firewall, can't actually access the website very well. They can access it, it's not blocked, but it doesn't download. Nothing downloads very fast. So basically what they were coming in, trying to download something and just bouncing straight back out again. So it was we were unable to use this website as a communication tool. It's great for Australia, so we turned it into a site for the Australian stakeholders. That's our Chinese site. You'll see that we also changed the look and feel of it, because what we didn't realise is that people in China actually interact with the websites different to the way we do. And it needed to be optimised for mobile as well, which our other one was, but it was pretty clunky. So that's our Chinese website. It has to be hosted in China on a Chinese server. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. We created diver cams. So back on the website, you can click through to what looks like an underwater world, and it is. It's canned footage. We did want to have it live, but it just takes too long to do that on a permanent basis. But so we got some canned footage where people can just click through and have a look around at an underwater world of Australia, see where the abalone come from. We've done a lot of online and offline events. This is a launch with Savour Tasmania last year in Shanghai. Last year we did a competition, a chef's competition with the China Cuisine Association, and it was an online competition where we asked all the young chefs in China to submit their ideas for innovative cuisine for abalone, which they did. We got about 120 entries. We brought 10 of them to Beijing for a final cook-off, and the guys standing over in that right side over there, they're both divers. So we brought the divers over from Australia to judge and work with the chefs, which was a real partnership idea. Went down really well. All of this material we fed out through social media to get that audience, to get that buzz around, ask for Australian wild abalone. It's a very, very formal, Chinese cuisine competition is a very formal event. They're government run and sanctioned. We then brought out the 3 winners to Australia in March this year. There's some divers and chefs on what we called our Abalone Gourmet Adventure. And we partnered with other groups in Australia so that it wasn't just about abalone. So what all of us as Australian industry have from lobster and pork and beef, we're all Australian, and we have an Australian story to tell. And if you've got visitors coming out here, they really love the interaction of all of the different industries. So we did some abalone and whiskey pairing down at Lark Distillery. We took them out to an orchard where they literally leapt off the bus so that they can go and pick an apple. There's our vice president again. He's in a cooking class learning how to cook wallaby. So we did a range of activities with these guys. We've got our young chefs to work with Australian chefs for the day at West Point Casino, West Point Hotel, and then we got to eat their production later. Social media is a must-do. Okay, if you've been to China, you must see that in China, I think the other day or yesterday, the guy asked us how long we spend on email. I think the question should have been, how long do we spend on our phones? And if you ask that question in China, it's probably 24/7. So they're just always on it, right? And so you've got to be on WeChat, you've got to be on Weibo so that they can find you and they can have a conversation with you. It's a really important part. We're just learning about this stuff. It's really difficult. And we're also monitoring how we're going against others. So you can use online listening tools to find out how many people are looking and listening. So what have we learned? We've learned there's no shortcuts, all right? You've just got to do it. And you've got to learn as you do it. You can be informed by research, but literally you've got to learn. You've got to have that clear value proposition, otherwise people aren't going to listen to you. The competition for those consumers in China is fierce. There is a lot of them, but everybody is there and everybody is trying to get their attention. So you've got to find some point of difference that you can highlight. And you've got to have an industry, a cohesive industry. You are not competing with each other. You're competing with the rest of the world. You must be cohesive in your approach to China. That has got to be my number one message from abalone. So to finish off, what are some of my ideas or thoughts about pork? It's that one. Do not recreate the wheel. Okay, we're all out there recreating wheels. When you go to the airport in Shanghai or Beijing and you're on that flight back from Shanghai and you run into the meat industry, the fruit and veg people, everybody from Australia, we've all been up in Shanghai for the past week. We've all been doing different things, targeting the same people. That is stupid. It's a waste of money. So let's work together. The right partnerships are crucial. I've got these partnerships. I'm introducing them to pork, I'll introduce them to lobster, because it doesn't take away from my partnership. We're all Australian, we need to do that, and it's a much richer partnership if it's with all of us. And everybody's going there. And this is literally, a sort of a time-lapse photograph of an airport in China. Everybody is going there. But the key comes back to what Peter said at the beginning. What is your story? You have to figure that out. It's not good enough, as Hollis says, to be, we're clean and green. Everyone's clean and green. What is the story of Australian pork that is going to set the world on fire in China? Thank you.